Hi, I'm Holly, and with my sister Heather, you're listening to Haunted Family Podcast, a weekly podcast about the paranormal, unsolved mysteries, and even some true crime.
Well, yes, it is.
It is. I don't know if you can tell or not, but there's some new stuff happening over here. Can you tell?
You mean the sirens behind you? No, that's old. We hear that all the time.
No, that is old. No, I got a new computer.
What?
And I'm wearing glasses. So not only can I see the screen and I can see my notes, but I am not afraid that my computer is just randomly going to shut off.
Yeah, she is no longer trying to record while holding her power cable into her computer with her toes.
I know, and you think that we're joking about that, but no, we're not.
We don't joke about holding things in with our toes. Our listeners are like, what? Okay, so you will want to be paying attention to like our Instagram, because we are going to be announcing a giveaway soon.
Yay, we love giveaways.
We hadn't done one in quite a while, and we're setting on some sample merchandise for a standalone Haunted Family Podcast merch shop. So why not share it with our loyal listeners?
Yeah.
You all are loyal, right?
I think they're cheating on us with other podcasts.
What? Well, I mean, confession. I cheat on us with other podcasts.
I do too. Oh my god. I just realized the new season of Serial came out, and I'm so sad that I caught up. And it's great. I couldn't listen to season 2. I tried to get into it, but that whole Bergdahl thing, I just couldn't. I don't know. It just made me angry. So I couldn't do season 2, but season 3 is good. Well, first 3 episodes are good. I mean, I can tell you guys what it's about, because that's not a secret.
They probably listen to it also.
Oh yeah, probably. You guys are probably how I found out that the season 3 had launched already, but it follows the Cleveland Judiciary Center for an entire year. Good stuff.
Yeah. Let's see. What podcasts have I been listening to recently? Well, because I don't get enough of true paranormal stories with my YouTube weekly installment, I've recently become obsessed with Jim Harold's Campfire, which is a whole podcast full of people calling in with true paranormal stories. And if you're into our paranormal episodes, you probably actually already listened to Jim Harold, because he is like the OG of paranormal podcasts. So yeah, I'm late to the party as far as the Campfire goes, because I'm kind of late to the party about podcasts in general. Holly literally drugged me into listening to podcasts kicking and screaming.
Yes, well, thanks to Serial. Like I was trying to tell this to Ernie the other day, because I was actually telling him about season 3 while we were driving in Ohio. It seemed fitting, but I was telling him that Serial was what got me started in podcasting. Before that, I didn't even know what a podcast was, and actually, I listened to like the first 3 or 4 episodes of Serial. I didn't even know there was a podcast app. I just went to the website, and I was listening to it while painting my kitchen.
You paint your kitchen all the time.
I've only painted it that one time, but I paint rooms in my house all the time.
Okay, you've painted kitchens in various other houses all the time.
Yes. I don't like to look at the same color for any length of time, but it's funny because my bedroom is the only room in this house that has never been painted.
Okay, so if you've read the title of this episode, You know, we're dealing with kind of a controversial serial killer.
Aren't they all, though?
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of people, especially recently, who just don't believe that they got their guy on this one. There's a lot of people who believe that Wayne Williams, who was convicted of 2 murders, but is suspected in, 23 to 30 other murders, is actually innocent.
Well, I don't think he's innocent. But I don't think that he's guilty of all the crimes.
I don't think so either. One thing that made me very suspicious about whether or not he's guilty of all of them is just it all seems so disjointed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He doesn't have a clear pattern like a lot of other serial killers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, but he did fit John Douglas's profile. Okay. So, let's just jump in.
Okay, so let's get into this. These murders happened in a very short amount of time. We're talking between 1979 and 1981. And his victims ranged in age from 7 years old to 28.
Okay, so Wayne Williams lived with his parents in their basement. That's that's stereotypical, isn't it?
It is, but it's not really. I mean, people think, the weirdo always lives in the basement, but it doesn't actually happen that way. Very rarely will you actually find the weirdo living in the basement.
Well, that's true. But in this case, he's living in the basement. And he was trying to be a podcaster before podcasting was a thing.
Well,
he had a low watt radio station. I'm air quoting radio station. And he also was a photographer and would try to book bands and stuff. So
like a promoter.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Right. He was pretty much unemployed-ish.
But self-employed.
But self-employed.
He was hustling. He was trying to make a way in the world without tying himself up to a 9-to-5. Leaving free time for activities and murder.
Right, which is always important.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he was hustling, but I mean, was he really hustling? No. He wasn't making enough to support himself. I mean, hell, he was living in his parents' basement.
Yeah. He was hanging out at radio stations, I assume trying to get a job at them, but he was not on their payroll, to the best of my knowledge.
No. Right. Although Heather and I grew up in radio stations. Our dad was a DJ like all of our lives. So
we have wrote spots and commercials for radio stations that I still hear on the air.
Right.
And we didn't get a dime for those things.
We did not. And we taught our local weather person how to enunciate because it was Eastern Kentucky and he didn't enunciate well. And you know what? We get nothing from that.
I'm sure some of our listeners are like, these girls know how to enunciate? What? You're hearing, look.
Do as we say, not as we do.
You're hearing, like, real us. But we do actually have, like, radio voices that we could put on. Holly likes to refer to mine as Tour Guide Barbie.
Yeah.
Because I break it out when I'm, like, doing, like, tour guide and hosting things for events. And it's really funny. I don't even notice I slip into that, though.
So, 1979, Edward Hope Smith, people called him Teddy, and Alfred Evans, known as Q, both 14, disappeared 4 days apart.
That's one of those things about this, about these killings, is that, I mean, this was a very short period of time that all these people...
He had, like, hardly any rebound time.
That's why some people actually refer to him as a spree killer. Because of how short the time period was. But, that's neither here nor there.
So those two went missing. But then there's a tieback. A victim that happened several months later, towards the end of the spree in 81, lived in the same apartment building as those first two. So 3 kids in one apartment building all went missing.
Yeah.
Bodies of the first 2 were found July 28th in a wooded area. Edward had a .22 caliber gunshot wound to his upper back. And I do not know.
Alfred was strangled.
Okay. That's right. I have another list that tells me how everybody died.
I just pulled up the Wikipedia list on it. Because it lists how everyone died. When they know how they died.
Right. So then, September.
Because my notes were all over the place on this, so.
I know, it's crazy. September 4th, Milton Harvey disappeared. He was going to the bank for his mom and riding a yellow 10-speed.
At 14, our mom wouldn't trust us to go to the bank.
No. I was going to say, Emmy is 14 and we live within walking distance to my bank and I don't trust her.
At 36, Mom wouldn't trust me to go to the bank for her.
At 16, Mom wouldn't trust me to drive even when her glasses were broken and she couldn't see.
You'll kill us all. I remember that. Okay.
So Milton went missing and he was found a week later.
They could not determine the cause of death.
Right.
And then October 24th, not 24th, October 21st, Yusef Bell, age 9, disappeared, and I don't have a date that he was found. Do you have the date that he was found?
I do not.
Okay. Well, he was strangled. Now,
witnesses, but we always talk about eyewitnesses are not reliable, but witnesses saw him getting into a blue car. Oh, November 8th. He was found November 8th.
Okay.
And he was found by a janitor who was looking for a place to pee. Still wearing the same outfit that he was wearing when he left, except now there was a piece of masking tape stuck to it. Then, March 4th, 1980, the first female victim, 12-year-old Angel Lanier. She went missing about 4 p.m. wearing denim cutoffs. she was leaving her friend's house. They were watching Sanford and Son. Do 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 do.
Oh, you know, I used to love watching that show.
I know, I did too. Lanier's body was found 6 days later, also in a wooded vacant lot. Pretty much, woods are bad. Stay away from
I
them.
love playing in the woods.
No. Okay, so she was also found wearing the same clothes that she left home in, only she had a pair of white panties that were not hers, stuffed in her mouth. And her hands were tied with electrical cord. And she was strangled. A week later, well, a week after her disappearance, another person disappeared. 11-year-old Jeffrey Mathis. I mean, he is averaging like, a kill a week at least. 11-year-old Jeffrey Mathis. He was also on an errand for his mother. I bet children in the 80s were like, don't send me on an errand, I'll get murdered.
But I remember, we had a whole lot of freedom in the 80s.
Yeah, parents really hated their kids in the 80s.
That's not true. They just was oblivious to the fact that there were serial killers everywhere.
No. Okay,
one of our cousins, actually, his children was listening to stories of our childhood, and the kid looked at him and was like, how did any of you all survive to adulthood? Because, we was telling stories about how wild we were and running wild and free and playing on strip mines and... Yeah.
I don't know how we survived.
I don't either. We never encountered a serial killer that I know of when we was little, though. I'm surprised considering where we grew up.
Exactly. Okay, so Jeffrey Mathis went missing. Later, a girl said that she saw him getting into a blue car with a light-skinned man and a dark-skinned man. So, she waited actually months. I don't know how many months, but just months before she said anything about this, about him getting into a car. So, I don't know if maybe it really was a blue car or if news had leaked out from the first victim.
Yeah.
Yeah, that said that, who knows. But the body of Jeffrey didn't turn up for 11 months, and it was found in a briar patch. And they did not have a cause of death. Then on May 18, 14-year-old Eric Middlebrooks disappeared. He was seen answering the phone at home and then leaving in a hurry on his bicycle. He took a hammer with him. His body was found the next day next to his bicycle in the rear garage of an Atlanta bar.
Okay.
Well, that was also next door to the Georgia Department of Offender Rehabilitation.
That's not suspicious at all.
No, not at all. His pockets were inside out, and his chest and arms had stab wounds. But the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Now, on a side note, a few weeks before he was murdered, he had testified against 3 other kids in a robbery case.
So
I'm just saying that other people had motive to kill him.
Yeah.
June 9th, 12-year-old Christopher Richardson went missing on his way to the local pool. He was not found until January. But when he was found, he was not in the same swim trunks that he went missing in. But he was also found with another victim, Earl Terrell.
Who we've not mentioned yet because Earl has not disappeared. Earl is
still alive at this live, yeah.
Yes.
So, June 9th. Oh, wait, I already said June 9th. June 22nd, 7-year-old LaTanya Wilson disappeared. People think that she was abducted by 2 men, one of whom was seen climbing into the apartment window and then holding Wilson in his arms as he spoke to the other man in a parking lot.
That is a consistent theme you'll see here, is that most eyewitnesses reported seeing 2 men.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, only Mr. Williams was found guilty of the murders.
Right. So, on October 18th, Wilson's body was found. And by that time, it was just a skeleton. The next day, after LaTanya went missing, 10-year-old Aaron Witch disappeared. He was last seen near a grocery store getting into a blue car with 1 or 2 men. Witnesses' description of the car matched the description of a similar car implicated in the earlier disappearances. The following day, his body was found under a bridge. And death was asphyxiation from a broken neck that he suffered in the fall. So he was probably just shoved off. He probably was still alive when he was thrown off the bridge. July
cool.
1980, 2 more kids, Anthony Carter and Earl Terrell, were murdered. Okay, between August and November, 5 more killings.
August 20th, 1980, Clifford Jones. On September 14th, Darren Glass. On October 9th, Charles Stevens. November 1st, Aaron Jackson. November 10th, Patrick Rogers. January 3rd, 1981, Lubby Girder. On January 22nd, Terry Prue. February 6th.
Yeah. Terry Prue was actually also Luby's friend. And he was also the one that was living in the apartment building that the very first 2 victims went missing from.
Yeah, well, between January 3rd and May 11th, everyone that was murdered, all the children that was murdered, died from either asphyxiation or strangulation.
Yeah.
On February 6th, Patrick Baltazar. February 19th, Curtis Walker. March 2nd, Joseph Bell. March 13th, Timothy Hill. May 11th, William Barrett. And that's the children. Between March 20th, 1981 and May 22nd, 1981, 6 adults was murdered. All 6 of these have been attributed to Williams. He was actually convicted of 2 of them. And they are Eddie Duncan, who disappeared on March 20th. Larry Rogers, who disappeared on March 22nd. Michael McIntosh, who disappeared on March 25th. Jimmy Ray Payne, who disappeared on April 23rd. And Williams was tried and convicted of his murder. John Porter, who disappeared sometime in April. And Nathan Cater, who disappeared May 22nd. Williams was also tried and found guilty of his murder.
Yeah. That's a lot of people. This was such a big deal that the FBI got involved. Not just the FBI, but John Douglas, who we have talked about several times, who we absolutely love, was assisting them in coming up with a profile. Criminal profiling was really new at this time. And so John Douglas wrote out a very detailed profile of what the killer would be like and how they could catch him. And it was never actually ever released. We have kind of a summary-ish of it, which we'll go through in just a minute. Yeah, it's just been pieced together. He also writes about it in his book Mindhunter.
Yeah, if you want to read through some of the FBI's released documents on this, you can go to the FBI vault on the FBI's website and read through some of it. I will warn you, some of it's handwritten and very hard to read, but it is very fascinating to go through some of their case files. Yeah, and some of it's really poorly scanned, but it was very interesting to read.
Yeah, it's 135 pages worth of notes.
Yeah. If it hadn't been 135 pages, I totally would have printed it out and highlighted. But, that's a whole lot of pages.
That is a whole lot of pages.
We don't have a big fancy sponsor to pay my ink and paper and, bind my notes for me.
You don't have... You know what? I'm going to buy you a binder. I think they're like $40 or something. That's what I'm going to get you for Christmas. So you can bind your own notes.
Don't. I actually have one.
Do you really?
I do. I found one at a thrift store a couple years ago. It also laminates.
What? And you never shared this bit of information with me?
Well, it's it's the type of binder that like glues the edges.
Still, that could be cool. Okay, I was gonna get you one that like spiral bounds it. Like
I'd love one of those. I don't actually know how I'd use it, but
how does the glue? You would bind your notes. Hello. How does the glue one work?
You put the thing in the thing and it melts it, and then you put your pages in it.
Can I borrow it?
Probably.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's okay. I was just thinking. Yeah, I just have an idea.
I'll show you how to use it. We got it for laminating stuff in the sewing room.
No, I just want to borrow it for binding. Cool. Okay.
We just got off on a really crafty tangent.
We did. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So, some facts. Let's read some of the profile. So, John Douglas said, well, first what he did was he showed up. He visited crime scenes for several of the victims: Alfred Evans, Edward Hope Smith, Milton Harvey, Christopher Richardson, and Earl Lee Terrell. And they were all in wooded areas. So, and he looked at basically what he knew from interviewing other killers and their profile. And he came up with kind of a guide. And he said that the guy would be familiar with the crime scenes. That, of course, I mean, why would you, if you're a killer, of course you're going to go somewhere that you're familiar with.
Yeah. You want to prey in areas you're comfortable. You know how to get out of, you know how to blend in.
Right. So he said that maybe his job was going to have him be able to drive through the area, or maybe usually they live in the area, but the guy was going to be around enough to know that the dump sites were not very well traveled areas. He abducts street kids, basically. And how he would do, like, this is not in...
Or kids that, had a good amount of freedom. Like you saw the kid who was at Milton Harvey that was going to the bank for his mom. You get the same
spot and break up. That's okay. It's probably fine on your end, so I'll be able to hear it. But
or kids that had a certain amount of freedom. Like you saw
impersonate
Milton Harvey who was going to...
When he was finally caught, he had lights and sirens on his vehicle, and he would basically drive around and tell kids that he was going to arrest them. So more than likely this was how he got those kids, is he pretended to be somebody in authority. So one of his neighbors actually said that he thought he was a cop because he always drove detective-like vehicles. And it was actually this vehicle in particular that kind of clinched his conviction, because it was a blue station wagon, which doesn't look detective-ish to me, but whatever.
Maybe back then that's what cops drove.
Maybe.
I doubt it.
It had it got repossessed December 31st of 79, so shortly after the killing started. And when they got it, when the FBI got it, it had a police siren, blue, red, and amber emergency lights, a police scanner, a CB unit, and headlights equipped with flashers. So more than likely that's how he was getting the kids in his vehicle, is he was probably telling them that they were in trouble and he was going to arrest them. John Douglas said that the offender would more than likely be black.
Which was kind of groundbreaking at the time, because you don't really see a whole lot of African American serial killers.
I know. It's pretty much your serial killer is going to be white men. I mean, like, let's just be honest. A white man is more likely to murder you.
Well, I mean, in this country, they've got serial killers in other countries who are...
Right, okay, but I'm talking about the United States.
Yeah.
In the United States, you're more likely to be killed by a white male serial killer.
Yeah.
Actually, you're more likely to be killed by your husband or wife, but if you're going to be killed by a serial killer, it's a white man.
Or a cow. I think cows have a really high body count. I always love those little memes you see on Facebook of, what animal you're most likely to die by. And it's usually not the ones you think of, like sharks. It's like, random ones like a kitty cat.
My cats try to kill me all the time. But anyway, his rationale for this was that the victims were all black children, and that they would be more comfortable around a black man, and more likely to have being seen with the killer not looks so out of place.
Yes. It was actually one of the theories raised. I don't know if it was actually a theory raised by Wayne Williams himself, but I know some people who, purport his innocence believe that all of the murders are related to white supremacists and KKK activity in the area, particularly Charles T. Sanders, who once, while being secretly recorded, praised the murders, but he is not on tape taking credit for them.
Right. I mean, it's a good theory.
Police did bring in Sanders and his brothers for investigation, and they all passed lie detector tests. And actually, this was actually in 2005, 2006 that they did lie detector tests on them. So, I mean, yes, it could be that the cops were crooked and covering for them in 2005, 2006, but reading through the FBI evidence on this case, what the FBI released, I don't believe it.
Right.
And I also believe, like what John Douglas was saying, that the children in particular would be more comfortable around and go to somebody of their own ethnic background.
Right. So John Douglas also said that the killer would have a poor criminal record. I mean, well, this is kind of... There are some things that, if you read his profiles, that you're kind of like, yeah. And while they're important, they're also pretty obvious to people, who, I don't know, devour true crime. I mean, of course you're a criminal. Of course your killer is not going to just start with killing kids.
No, you're going to have
some kind of build up.
Yeah.
Well,
you don't wake up one day and be like, you know what? I'm going to murder some kids today. Okay, somebody might have said that at one point in time in life. I don't know. I don't know the inner thoughts of every serial killer, but usually there's a build up.
Right. Well, his only prior record was for impersonating an officer and unauthorized use of emergency equipment and filing a false stolen auto report. So not a terrible record,
but suspicious. I'm suspicious of anybody who impersonates an officer.
Now, I thought this was interesting. They said that his favorite colors would be black, dark blue, and browns. And we would be able to tell basically by the clothes that he wears and the colors of the cars he drives. Well, Williams's wardrobe was mostly drab browns. He drove a lot of cars, but they were usually burgundy, light blue, silver gray, brown, yellowish brown, white, and blue.
Basically anything that he could afford.
Pretty much.
Pretty much like what most people, pretty much what anybody who's, hustling for their life is driving.
Right. The offender's probably single, always had a difficulty in relating to members of the opposite sex. As a youth, he was sexually abused. Odds are high that he spent some time in juvie, as well as other forms of incarceration. Williams was single, and his acquaintance told investigators that he was hardly ever seen with women and had no apparent girlfriend. The women who came to work for his music business, air quoting again. A woman who worked with him said that she'd had sex with him, but earlier in the investigation she said that she had not. So I don't know about that. She's probably embarrassed as hell. So this is where it gets it wrong. They have no record of him being sexually abused, and he had never spent any time in juvenile detention. The offender will generally be between age 25 and 29. Well, Williams was actually 23. So one of the things that I didn't read that John Douglas said was that the murderer would dump near bodies of water the next victims, and so they should start staking out bridges and streams. And it was actually on one of these stakeouts that Wayne was found. The detectives see a car drive across a bridge. It stops. They heard a splash. And then the car goes up a little bit and then turns around and starts coming back. And that's when they pull him over.
So when these murders were happening, we didn't have a lot of the same technology that we have now.
Oh, no.
But since Mr. Williams still maintains his innocence, and there's actually, I think there's a podcast that the whole purported premise of the podcast is trying to prove that he is innocent. Crime labs have started going back and testing some of the evidence that was found in the cases. And they've had some interesting results. Wouldn't you say, Holly?
Yes.
Particularly in the case of 11-year-old Patrick Baltazar, who Baltazar went missing on February 6th, 1981, at the age of 11. They found hairs on his body. And while the DNA lab at the FBI headquarters was not 100% conclusive, they listed the odds of those hairs coming from any person other than Wayne Williams being 130 to 1.
Well, in several on several children, there were dog hairs that matched Wayne Williams' dogs 1 to 100.
Well, also found on Baltazar's body. And the genetics laboratory at UC Davis ran tests on those hairs in 2007 and said that there was a 99% probability that the DNA sequence came from the Williams family dog.
Yeah. That kind of breaks my heart, because I can just imagine like the sad look that my dogs would give me, like if I was killing somebody. They would be like,
well, I mean, it was a German Shepherd. It was a German Shepherd, so it might have been hairs that he had on him.
Oh, that's true.
That shed onto, because German Shepherds shed so much. It's not like our dogs, because we have Shih Tzus. They don't really shed a lot.
Yeah, which is really funny because my Frenchie does shed, even though it's a short hair. It's crazy, but the Shih Tzus don't shed at all.
The joys of a long-haired dog.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I could just imagine me trying to murder somebody in my house and Ruby looking at me like, Mom, please don't. We don't do things like this.
We're going to have to clean this up. I thought better of you. Who's going to take care of me when you're in the popo?
Can I go live with Aunt Holly now? She doesn't murder people that I know of. Yeah. Ruby would so be disappointed in me, and I just couldn't handle that.
Yeah.
So I strive to be a better person for my dogs.
Truth. We don't deserve dogs.
They also found fibers on the bodies that matched fibers of the carpet in his car.
Right. So he's guilty, people. Maybe not of all 25, but he's guilty of
a fair amount of, especially the children's murders.
Right.
I've no doubt in my mind. And reading through a lot of this stuff was just, yeah. Green cotton fibers found on 2 of the victims. The FBI report does not mention, at least not that I'm seeing here, mention which of the 2 victims. Found on 2 of the victims matched a bedspread from Wayne Williams' bed.
Yeah, I think I might have to start listening to that podcast that's trying to prove him innocent, because I'm seeing overwhelmingly that he's killed kids.
Or there was an elaborate, well-orchestrated plot from the FBI down to the grassroots law enforcement level to set him up for a string of white supremacist murders.
Right.
And
I mean,
in my personal opinion, the simplest explanation is usually the right explanation.
Right. I mean, I know that polygraph is not admissible in court, but he failed 3 times. So, I mean, afterwards, again, eyewitnesses, so, believe what you want. But eyewitnesses said that they saw him with various victims, but they also didn't really say why they never came forward until then. So, whatever. And then there were people who said that they saw him have cuts and scratches on him around the time of the disappearances.
Yeah. What really did him in for the murders of there's actually, let me find where was I at? A serotonologist for the Georgia State Crime Lab furnished the FBI with a report of analysis on stains located in the rear seat cover of the station wagon. And it tested positive to be blood.
Yeah. I mean, these cars in the 70s
blood
and 80s, people,
blood types consistent with, blood types consistent with, does it say whose it was? It says that these blood types were consistent with the blood type and PGM type of William Barrett and John Harold Porter. Just blood type, not like they didn't do like DNA analysis on it, because it was the 80s.
Right. So I mean, my guess is that you've got 10 cases that all form a pattern. You know, you've got Alfred Evans, Eric Middlebrooks, Charles Stevens, William Barrett, Terry Prue, John Porter, Lubby Geter, Joseph Bell, Patrick Belisar, and Larry Rogers, who were all similar. Those more than likely we can say was him. Now, I mean, the others, I don't know.
But, I mean...
Well, I'm not saying no. I mean, if you killed 10 kids, that's 10 kids too many that you killed.
I think it's very likely that he probably had an accomplice, considering how many witnesses said that they saw the children with 2 people before they disappeared. I know we always say eyewitness testimony is not very reliable, but I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that.
Right. I mean, I would say he had an accomplice, although it's very unlikely for serial killers to have accomplices, but not unheard of. And, I mean, let's just look into the fact that the murders stopped once he was arrested.
Yes.
Of course, it could just be that people, you know, the accomplice got scared and went straight, or maybe he just moved somewhere and is still killing.
Wild theory. Maybe the accomplice was one of his last victims.
Ooh, maybe, because the last victim was 27.
I mean, that's just a crazy wild theory, but I mean, as plausible as anything else. So Wayne Williams is still alive, and he is still strongly professing his innocence. But I don't feel it.
Right.
I mean, for one thing, we've got concrete links between his home, his dog, and multiple victims.
Right.
I mean, I guess there could be another explanation for that, but the most logical explanation is usually the correct one.
Right. And I'm actually, the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking you're right. That last victim, 27-year-old, could have possibly been his accomplice.
Nathan Carter or John Porter, the 27-year-old, the 28-year-old. One of those.
Because, I mean,
they're outliers.
Right. You know too much, you get killed. Well, do you have a stupid criminal?
So, let me set this up by saying, years ago, before I actually moved in here, my boyfriend had a cleaning lady. Same woman who cleaned his mom's house, cleaned this house. And she wasn't very good. She had a tendency of breaking things, and then instead of telling him, she would just hide it.
That's true. I remember that.
Or I would decorate for Christmas, and then she would come in, and I guess she didn't like my taste, and she would rearrange things. And she kept asking if she could have our TV. But this cleaning lady that I'm going to tell you about is probably worse than her. A lady in Brooklyn, hired 2 women to come to her apartment and clean for her. She came home and found one of the pair passed out in her floor. Her home trashed and all of her liquor drank.
Me as a cleaning lady.
She paid them a pretty good amount of money. She paid them $185 and a $60 tip.
Okay, I would not tip them for drinking all my alcohol and passing out.
Well, you pay them in advance. And tip them in advance. And all they had to do was clean the common spaces that she shared with her 3 roommates. So, I mean, pretty easy job.
Right. Unless you're at my house.
This wasn't going to be like an every week thing. It was like, just every 6 months, deep clean. She let the women in, went to work. Her neighbor went over and found the women sleeping on her sofa.
That's so crazy.
Then I guess her neighbor called her.
Good times.
Yeah. Well, she didn't go home right away. She emailed the service that she hired them through and assumed that these women would be gone by the time she got home. And that was not the case. She got home at 5:30 and one of the women was still passed out on her floor. The apartment door was wide open. The keys were missing. Everything in the house was just like a bomb had went off in it. She said the lady who owned, one of the ladies who owned the apartment, said that her first thought was like there was some sort of accident, like she had mixed chemicals to clean and had inhaled them and like had an accident or something. But no, they had drank all of her liquor and got drunk and trashed her apartment.
Oh, God. Oh.
She had to call the police. It took 45 minutes for the police to get the cleaning lady together enough to get them into the ambulance. The woman was too drunk to tell the police her name, too drunk to put her flip-flops on.
Oh, God, that reminds me of a couple weeks ago. I was taking Emmy to school, and I was so tired. And I just slipped on some shoes that were laying beside my bed. And I go to the school, and I come back, and when I walk back into my room, and I see my shoes laying in the floor, I realize I wore one flip-flop and one slide to the school. I didn't even have matching shoes on. So anyway, pay attention to our Instagram, which is Haunted Family Podcast, because we are going to be doing a giveaway, and you will love what we're giving away. Yes. Check out my Etsy shop, CatHairGlitter. Just CatHairGlitter. And check out our YouTube channel for Paranormal Storytime. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye.